Tonight we step softly into the shadow of a medieval gallows, where justice is not hidden behind closed doors, but raised high above the market square for every tired face to see. In 1938, archaeologists working near York uncovered human remains that carried the marks of execution, and later study by British researchers placed those bones within a world where law, faith, and fear pressed heavily on ordinary life. You do not enter a fantasy of iron masks and endless screaming. You enter something quieter, colder, and more disturbing. You enter a society that believes cruelty can protect the living. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as the night settles around you, write your location and local time in the comments. Somewhere, another listener may be drifting through this same dark street with you. The air smells of damp straw, wood smoke, and old rain trapped between timbered houses. You hear the uneven creak of cartwheels over mud and stone. Somewhere nearby, a church bell lifts its voice into the grey morning, calling souls toward a prayer, trade, judgment, and survival. It is not a loud world by modern standards, yet it is never truly silent. Dogs bark beneath tables, geese complain in the lane. A blacksmith strikes iron with a rhythm like a slow, tired heart. You stand among villagers who know one another too well. Every debt is remembered, every insult travels, every missing loaf, broken fence, or whispered accusation can grow into something dangerous. In such a place, punishment is not only about guilt, it is about keeping the whole fragile pattern from tearing apart. This is the first truth. Medieval communities are small enough to feel personal, but unstable enough to feel threatened by almost anything. A stolen cloak may mean a family freezes. A stolen sheep may mean hunger. A false oath may shake trust in the very system that allows neighbours to trade, marry, inherit, and forgive. The law is not an abstract machine. It is a nervous hand placed over a flickering candle. Records from English royal courts confirm that theft, assault, trespass, debt, and murder filled the roles of medieval justice. Legal historians at Oxford and Cambridge have long studied these records, not as legends, but as practical documents from a society trying to survive disorder. They show a world where the king's law slowly reaches into villages of fields, taverns, and crossroads. Yet that reach is uneven. Some places feel the weight of royal justice. Others depend on manor courts, church courts, custom, rumour, and local memory. You may imagine law as a stone wall, firm and complete. Here, it is more like woven reeds, useful, but always bending. The gallows stands beyond the busier stalls, close enough to be seen, far enough to carry a chill. It is not there by accident. Its presence teaches without speaking. Children pass it on errands. Merchants glance toward it while weighing cloth. Travellers notice it when they enter the town, and they understand the message before anyone says a word. Order lives here, the gallows whispers. Or at least, order is trying very hard to look alive. The cruelty of medieval punishment begins with this need to be seen. Modern punishment often hides itself inside prisons, paperwork, hearings, and sealed doors. Medieval punishment usually moves outward. It becomes public. It becomes physical. It becomes a story carried by hundreds of mouths. The crowd is not a mistake in the system. The crowd is part of the sentence. You feel that crowd gathering now, though no one yet knows the condemned person's name in your mind. A baker wipes flour from his wrist. A woman pulls her cloak closer. A boy climbs onto a barrel, because of course he does. Humanity has always had terrible curiosity. A medieval humanity is not pretending otherwise. There is a grim practicality in it. A ruler cannot send warnings by printed newspaper into every home. Many people cannot read official notices. The body of the punished person becomes the notice. The scaffold becomes the page. Pain, shame, and death become a language everyone understands. That does not make it less cruel. It only makes it more useful. A quirky detail survives in the strange landscape of old punishment customs. In some European towns, petty offenders could be forced to wear symbolic objects, such as oversized wooden signs or ridiculous stones, turning the body into a walking joke. The point was not only pain, it was embarrassment made public, almost bureaucratic comedy with splinters. Medieval authority could be terrifying, but it also had a taste for humiliating theatre. Apparently, even justice occasionally enjoyed props, yet beneath the oddity lies a darker design. Shame is cheaper than imprisonment. A town does not need to feed a prisoner for months when it can expose someone for one afternoon. A pillory, a cart ride, a shaved head, or a branded mark can save money while engraving memory into the community. Everyone sees, everyone repeats, everyone adjusts their behaviour, at least for a little while. Scholars still debate how far this public cruelty reflected genuine popular belief, and how far it served ruling elites who needed visible obedience. Some historians emphasize community participation, arguing that neighbors expected punishment and sometimes demanded it. Others focus on power, noting that rulers used ritual violence to make their authority feel sacred and unavoidable. Both views may carry part of the truth. Medieval punishment is rarely simple. It is a knot of fear, faith, revenge, poverty, and performance. You look toward the church tower, and the scene deepens. Medieval law does not live apart from religion. Sin and crime often lean into each other, not always identical, but close enough to share a shadow. An oath is sworn before God. A ruler claims duty under God. A public sentence can seem like moral cleansing, not only civic correction. The punished body is made to carry more than legal guilt. It carries disorder itself. This is why cruelty can seem reasonable to people who fear chaos more than pain. That thought is uncomfortable, but it matters. A famine, a plague, a failed harvest, a war band on the road, or a rumour of rebellion can change how a community sees mercy. In a world without modern policing, quick communication, forensic laboratories, or secure prisons, terror becomes a tool. Not a noble tool, not a kind one, but a tool that many authorities trust. You feel the mud pulling at your shoes. The morning mist clings to wool sleeves and rough wooden posts. A man nearby mutters a prayer without looking holy at all. He looks cold, hungry, and interested. The executioner has not appeared, yet his absence has a shape. People make room for him before he arrives. That is another strange truth. The one who performs punishment may be despised, but the punishment itself is accepted. The community can need the executioner and reject him in the same breath. Medieval people are very skilled at contradictions. So are we, which is mildly inconvenient. The gallows is more than wood. It is a lesson in vertical form. The condemned rises above the crowd, not in honour but in warning. The body is lifted where eyes cannot avoid it. The soul, people hope or fear, travels elsewhere. The town returns to buying onions, mending shoes, and arguing over ale prices. Life continues because life must continue, and perhaps that is what makes the scene so unsettling. Cruelty is not always carried out by monsters. Sometimes it is carried out by clerks, sheriffs, neighbours, priests, and tired officials who believe they are preventing something worse. They do not wake thinking, "Let us be evil today." They wake thinking, "Let the market be safe. Let thieves hesitate. Let rebels tremble. Let God see that order has been defended." You stand there as the bell fades, the square breathes, the scaffold waits, and slowly, almost reluctantly, the question changes. You no longer ask only why medieval punishments were so cruel. You begin to ask what kind of world made cruelty look like protection. The church bell settles over the roofs like a command, and you find yourself walking through a town that is already awake, already worried, already counting what may be lost before sunset. Smoke rises from low chimneys. Pigs nose through the refuse near the lane. A woman shakes crumbs from a cloth, then quickly gathers what the birds do not steal. Nothing here is wasted, because waste is almost a kind of crime. You smell rye bread, wet leather, onions, and the sour edge of yesterday's ale. A child carries water in a wooden pail, leaning to one side beneath its weight. An old man sits beside a wall with one shoe split open, watching the street with eyes that have learned to measure every stranger. This is not a peaceful little painting from a manuscript margin. It is a cramped, nervous, breathing settlement where hunger is never very far away. Crime begins here, not in darkness alone, but in need. A missing hen can matter. A broken ploughshare can ruin planting. A stolen knife can leave a family unable to work, eat, or defend itself on the road. You may think of theft as a legal category, neat and tidy, but in this world it feels more like a wound in the skin of the household. Property is not simply property. It is warmth, labour, food, status, and sometimes survival. Records from medieval English manor courts show that daily disputes often involved animals, grain, fences, grazing rights, unpaid debts, and accusations of petty theft. Scholars at Yale and Oxford have examined these records to reconstruct ordinary life, and what emerges is not only violence, but constant friction. People argue over boundaries, tools, marriages, wages, and reputation. The law listens because these little conflicts are not little to those living inside them. The village is a tight room. Everyone hears the chair scrape. You pass a row of stalls where traders set out their goods beneath patched cloth awnings. Salted fish lies beside rough pottery. A cobbler bends over a shoe with patient resentment. He knows who owes him money. He knows whose son broke a latch last winter. He knows who drank too much at the alehouse and spoke against the reeve, then denied it in the morning. Memory is a public archive, and it has no mercy. There are no anonymous crowds here in the modern sense. People know your father, your trade, your debts, your temper, and the shape of your poverty. If you're accused, your past arrives with you. If you are trusted, that trust can protect you. If you are disliked, even a small suspicion may become heavy. Justice is woven from evidence, oath, standing, rumour, and the dangerous music of local opinion. A council order in many towns required citizens to help raise the hue and cry when a crime was discovered. That meant shouting, pursuing, and forcing the community into action, because there was no professional police force waiting around the corner. The alarm belonged to everyone. The responsibility belonged to everyone. Failure to join the chase could make a person suspicious, or at least shamefully useless. Medieval justice did not ask people merely to report disorder. It expected them to become part of the net. You hear it suddenly in your mind. That cry running down a lane. A door slams, sandals slap mud. Someone points toward the fields. A man with flour on his sleeves grabs a staff because apparently breakfast can wait when theft is sprinting toward the hedgerow. It is almost absurd, until you remember that the stolen thing may be the difference between rent and ruin. The cruelty of punishment grows from this shared fear. In a world where authorities cannot be everywhere, punishment must travel farther than the crime itself. It must reach those who are not present. It must lodge in the mind of the hungry boy, the angry labourer, the servant tempted by coins, the traveller considering a quick hand in the market. The sentence become a warning sent through memory. Poverty does not excuse crime in this world, though it often explains it. That is one of the colder truths. A hungry person may steal bread, but the baker may also be close to hunger. A wandering labourer may take a cloak, but the owner may have no second cloak. Compassion exists, certainly, but it competes with fear and scarcity. When everyone stands near the edge, mercy can feel expensive. This is why small crimes can receive punishments that seem severe to modern eyes. A community does not always see the offender as merely desperate. It may see him as a threat to fragile trust. If one person steals without consequence, Perhaps others will try. If others try, neighbours lock doors, accuse strangers, hoard grain, and refuse credit. Trade weakens, cooperation thins. The village grows colder, and cold is dangerous. A curious tidbit from medieval town life reveals how deeply communities feared dishonest trade. Bakers who sold underweight loaves could be punished by being dragged on a hurdle through the streets, with the false loaf displayed nearby. It sounds almost theatrical, and it was. The public did not need a lecture on weights and measures. It needed a body, a loaf, a procession, and a lesson with excellent visibility. Medieval bureaucracy had a strange talent for turning bad customer service into civic drama. Yet the humour fades when you understand the reason. Bread is not a luxury. It is the centre of the poor person's diet, the steady thing beneath the uncertain sky. A dishonest baker does not merely cheat a buyer, he threatens trust in the market, and trust is one of the invisible pillars holding the town upright. If the loaf lies, what else lies? Scholars continue to debate whether harsh treatment of petty crime came mainly from elite anxiety or from popular demand among ordinary people. Some historians argue that village communities often pushed for strict action because they lived with the consequences of disorder. Others suggest that royal and urban authorities amplified fear to strengthen control and revenue. The answer shifts from place to place, because medieval Europe was not one machine. It was a patchwork of customs, courts, privileges, and stubborn local habits. Your path turns toward the churchyard, where graves lie close to the living. Death is not hidden in distant institutions. It rests beside worship, trade, and gossip. The dead remind everyone that life is brief, judgment is near, and sin has consequences beyond the body. The church shapes moral imagination, and moral imagination shapes law. A thief may be seen as a sinner, but also as a danger to Christian fellowship. A liar may damage not only a contract, but the sacred value of an oath. So the boundary between private wrongdoing and public danger becomes thin. Adultery, insult, drunkenness, brawling, false measure, unpaid tithes, and Sabbath breaking can all disturb the harmony people think God desires. Not every offence leads to blood or chains. Many bring fines, penance, shame, or correction. Still, the deeper pattern remains. Behaviour belongs to the community, not only to the individual. You notice how closely watched everything is. The alewife's measure, the butcher's weights, the stranger's accent, the widow's visitors, the apprentice's obedience, the servant's honesty. A world without cameras can still be watched very carefully. Eyes are everywhere, and they belong to people with memories sharpened by necessity. This does not mean medieval people are constantly cruel. They feast, laugh, flirt, pray, sing, make jokes, care for children, and help neighbours in illness. They also punish harshly when fear tells them kindness may invite collapse. Human beings can share soup in the evening and attend a whipping in the morning. That is not comfortable. But history is rarely arranged for comfort. By midday, the market grows louder. Coins strike wood. A priest passes with lifted robes to avoid the mud. Two women argue over spoiled fish while pretending not to enjoy the performance. Somewhere, a clerk records a fine in a careful hand. Turning human irritation into legal memory, the town continues its slow labour of survival. You begin to sense that cruelty is not floating above this world like a storm cloud. It rises from the ground itself, from hunger, crowded houses, bad harvests, fragile trust, sacred oaths, and rulers who need obedience to be visible. Punishment becomes harsh because life is harsh, and because fear persuades people that harshness may keep the door from breaking open. The bell rings again. No one looks surprised. The square opens before you with the uneasy calm of a stage before the actors arrive. Stalls have been pushed back. Barrels stand in loose rows. A patch of mud has been trampled into a dark shine by hundreds of waiting feet. Above it all, the church tower watches with its stone face, while the town hall casts a blunt shadow across the gathered crowd. You hear the murmur first. It is not a roar, not yet. It is a woven sound of whispers, coughs, laughter, prayers, bargaining, and children asking questions they should probably not ask so brightly. A woman sells hot peas from a wooden bowl. A man complains about the price. Justice, apparently, does not cancel appetite. In this world, punishment is not merely carried out, it is performed. The platform stands low enough for faces to be seen, but high enough for the body to become visible above the people. Nearby, the pillory waits with its wooden holes for head and hands. It looks simple, almost foolish, until you imagine being locked inside it beneath every eye you know. Shame has a temperature. It is colder than iron. Public punishment works because the crowd completes it. A sentence without witnesses loses much of its power. Pain may punish the offender, but spectacle teaches the town. The watching faces become part of the law's machinery, remembering, judging, retelling, exaggerating, and passing the warning into kitchens and fields. A punishment seen by many becomes a punishment repeated many times. Medieval court records across England and France confirm the frequent use of fines, stocks, pillories, whipping, and public processions for lesser offences. Historians working with collections studied at universities such as Harvard and Oxford have shown that punishment often blended legal correction with ritual humiliation. The result was not random cruelty. It was structured visibility, a deliberate grammar of disgrace. You can feel that grammar around you. The offender is placed where everyone can read him. The crowd learns what has been violated. The object of the offence may be displayed, such as false measures, stolen cloth, spoiled meat, or a symbol of deceit. The town does not need a long legal explanation. It receives an image, and images remain. A man accused of selling rotten food might stand beside his own spoiled goods. A dishonest trader might be marched with the false weight that exposed him. A scold might be paraded through lanes in a humiliating device meant to silence and shame. These punishments turn wrongdoing into a moving signboard. Cruel, yes. Efficient. Also, yes. Medieval authority often admires efficiency in the most unpleasant ways. There is a strange rhythm to the gathering. People drift in not only from moral duty, but from curiosity and habit. Public justice interrupts ordinary labour with a sanctioned drama. It gives the town a story to share. Who flinched? Who cried? Who looked proud? Who laughed too loudly and revealed something ugly in himself? The punished person becomes the centre, yet the crowd also exposes its own soul. You stand near the edge, where the smell of damp wool and stale beer gathers heavily. A child tries to climb a fence. His mother pulls him down, then keeps watching. This is one of those small human contradictions that history never stops offering. She does not want him too close, but she does not take him away. The lesson must be seen, just perhaps not from the front row. Public punishment also creates belonging. That sounds disturbing because it is. When a crowd watches someone corrected, excluded, or destroyed, the crowd is reminded of who still belongs inside the circle. The offender stands outside, marked as dangerous or shameful. The watchers stand together, at least for the moment, as the decent people, the obedient people, the ones who understand the rules. It is community by contrast, not noble necessarily, but powerful. A quirky fringe belief clings to some accounts of execution sites and crossroads. People sometimes treated places of punishment as spiritually charged, almost unlucky, and later folklore imagined restless presences near gallows trees. Whether or not anyone saw a ghost, the fear makes sense. A place where law takes the body and perhaps risks the soul is not easily ordinary again. Even empty wood can remember. The official mind prefers a cleaner explanation. The square is chosen because it is central. The road is chosen because travellers will see. The gate is chosen because entry into the town must also mean entry into its discipline. Punishment occupies the places where public life is thickest. It is planted where memory will grow. Scholars still debate how willingly crowds participated in these rituals. Some researchers argue that public punishment reflected communal values, with neighbours expecting visible correction for visible disorder. Others caution that crowds could mock authority, pity the condemned, or turn unpredictable, forcing officials to manage emotions as carefully as bodies. A crowd may strengthen power, but it may also frighten power. Anyone who has dealt with a large group of bored people knows this. Though medieval sheriffs learned it with sharper consequences, the authorities understand the risk. They arrange order around the event. Officials stand near the platform. Clerks may record the sentence. The priest may appear, especially when the punishment touches the soul. The executioner or beadle moves with practiced economy, not because the scene is casual, but because ritual depends on control. If punishment looks confused, authority looks weak. If authority looks weak, the whole performance cracks. So everything is made legible, the offender is named, the offence is declared, the sentence is enacted, the crowd receives the message. This is not only about what happens to one person, it is about the state, the church, the town, or the Lord saying, "Here is the boundary, cross it, and your body may carry the answer." You notice the faces nearest the platform. Some are stern, some are eager, some are uncomfortable and trying not to show it. One man watches with the tense expression of someone who has done similar things and not been caught. Another stares at the ground, perhaps remembering a brother, a son, a friend. Public justice invites everyone to judge, but it also invites everyone to imagine being judged. That is part of its terror. The pillory closes with a wooden sound that seems smaller than the moment deserves. Head and hands are fixed. The person bends forward, neither standing nor kneeling, held in an awkward shape designed for ridicule. The crowd shifts. Someone laughs. Someone spits. Someone throws something soft. Thank heavens. Though not soft enough to preserve dignity, the punishment has begun, and yet the official pain may be less severe than the social one. For hours, the punished person is reduced to a lesson. Flies gather, neck muscles ache, the sun moves, friends may look away, enemies may take their little revenge, strangers may enjoy themselves more than they should. Humiliation becomes a slow weather, falling steadily over the body. Still, public punishment does not always mean maximum cruelty. Sometimes it offers a substitute for death or mutilation. A person might survive shame, pay a fine, and return to work. The same society that hangs thieves may also choose display over blood in many cases. Medieval justice is not one continuous scream. It is a range of pressures, from money to shame to pain to death, arranged according to status, offence, location, and the temper of those in power. That range matters. It reminds you that cruelty is not only measured by the wound, it is also measured by exposure, helplessness, and the knowledge that your neighbours will never forget. A scar can hide beneath clothing. A public disgrace can outlive the body that suffered it. The square slowly changes as the punishment continues. At first, people stare, then they talk, then some wander back to business. The event becomes part of the day's traffic, like buying grain or arguing over rent. This ordinary fading may be the most chilling part. The extraordinary becomes normal through repetition. A town can learn to step around suffering. The market resumes around the lesson. A woman chooses onions, a boy asks for sweet cakes. A priest speaks quietly with a clerk. A dog sleeps beneath a cart, deeply unimpressed by human ideas of justice. Life does not pause for cruelty as long as cruelty has been properly scheduled. You remain in the square as the light softens on the timbered roofs. The punished body is still there, fixed in place, made useful by discomfort. The crowd has taken what it came for, not only warning, but a story, a feeling, a reassurance that the rules still have teeth. Whether that reassurance is moral or merely convenient is harder to say. The square has spoken, and its language is shame. Beyond the square, the road bends toward the fields, and the town begins to loosen into hedges, ditches, orchards, and strips of dark earth. The air changes here. It smells of damp leaves, horse sweat, and smoke drifting low from distant cottages. Crows walk through the furrows with the confidence of small officials, inspecting whatever human beings have failed to protect. You follow the road until the house is thin, and the law feels less like a wall and more like a voice carried across distance. This is where the idea of the king's peace becomes important. It is not only a phrase for scribes, it is a promise, a warning, and a claim. The ruler says that violence, theft, and disorder are not merely private injuries. They are breaches in the peace that belongs to him. That idea changes everything. If a man strikes another in a lane, the wound is personal, certainly. Blood runs from one body, not from the crown. Yet the law may treat the act as more than an argument between neighbours. It becomes an offence against a wider order, a disturbance in the ruler's protection. The king's peace spreads over roads, markets, courts, and households, though never perfectly and never evenly. Where it reaches, crime begins to look like defiance. Records from royal courts in medieval England show the growing importance of crimes named against the crown. Legal historians at Harvard and Cambridge have traced how royal justice expanded through writs, heirs, and travelling justices, drawing local conflicts into a larger political structure. The old world of custom did not vanish, but it increasingly shared space with royal authority. The ruler's law learned to travel. You can almost hear it travelling now. Hooves on a road, a clerk's pen, a sheriff's order, a seal pressed into wax. None of these things looks as frightening as a blade, but together they create a system that can reach farther than one angry lord or village jury. The crown makes punishment part of government, and government makes punishment part of its own survival. In such a world, mercy and violence both become political. A pardon can show royal generosity. A hanging can show royal strength. A fine can fill the treasury while reminding everyone who has the right to forgive. Punishment is no longer only about correcting behaviour. It is about displaying the power to define disorder and end it. Power enjoys being seen. Quietly, of course. The medieval ruler lives inside a sacred imagination. Kingship is not treated as a mere contract between taxpayers and administrators. It is wrapped in ceremony, blessing, ancestry, conquest, and divine approval. A crime can therefore seem to disturb not just civil order, but the moral architecture beneath it. To break the peace is to step against a world arranged by God, ruler, lord, priest, and custom. That belief does not make every king saintly. Let us not flatter the crown too much. Medieval rulers could be practical, greedy, frightened, charming, violent, pious, and politically alert all at once. They defended peace partly because peace was holy, and partly because peace made taxes easier to collect. Human motives rarely arrive in clean robes. You pass a manor boundary marked by a ditch and old stones. The lord's authority still matters here. His court handles rents, land transfers, minor disputes, labour duties, and breaches of local custom. Yet above him, or beside him, royal justice presses in. Beneath him, villagers continue to enforce reputation through memory and gossip. Medieval law is layered, like wool worn against winter. Each layer scratches in its own way. A striking historical fact lies hidden in the machinery of the English crown. The Assize of Clarendon, issued under King Henry II in the 12th century, helped organise inquiries into serious crime through local juries of presentment. Modern scholars at Yale and Oxford often treat it as a key moment in the development of common law procedures. It did not create modern justice. but it helped strengthen the crown's hand in naming and pursuing offenders. Imagine the effect. Local men are expected to say who is suspected of robbery, murder, or theft. Suspicion becomes formal. Formal accusation moves toward royal process. The king's peace gains eyes in every hundred and village. The ruler does not need to know your face. Your neighbours may carry your name into his system. That's sufficient. It is also unsettling. The king's peace offers protection, but protection can feel very similar to surveillance when hunger, anger, or bad luck bring your name into court. A system built to reduce private revenge may itself become frightening. Instead of feud spreading unchecked, royal punishment steps forward. Yet the punishment can be severe because the offence is imagined as a wound in public order. This helps explain the cruelty of sentences for robbery, treason, and serious violence. A robber on the road is not only a thief, he threatens trade, pilgrimage, communication, and the king's promise that roads may be travelled under protection. A traitor is not only disloyal, he attacks the body politic, the sacred arrangement that holds lordship and obedience together. The more symbolic the crime becomes, the harsher the punishment may grow. A curious fringe tidbit appears in old tales of royal justice. Some stories claim that certain kings could heal illness by touch, especially a disease believed to swell the neck. Whether one accepts the belief or not, it shows how deeply sacred power could cling to monarchy. A ruler who could be imagined as a healer could also be imagined as the hand that cuts corruption from the realm. And evil minds often held tenderness and terror under the same crown. Out on the road, the wind presses through dry grass, a rider passes with a cloak dark from rain, and every stranger briefly becomes a question. Is he a merchant, messenger, fugitive, soldier, pilgrim, or thief? The king's peace promises an answer, but the answer may come late. When authority is slow, punishment must be memorable enough to arrive ahead of it in the imagination. So severity becomes a kind of distance weapon. The law cannot stand at every bridge, but fear can. The law cannot sleep in every barn, but rumour can. A harsh execution in one town travels along trade routes through stories, growing sharper with each retelling. By the time it reaches another village, it may prevent a crime, or simply make people more afraid. Authorities are often satisfied with either result. Scholars still dispute how effective royal punishment was in actually reducing crime. Some argue that the visible expansion of courts and penalties helped restrain violence over time. Others warn that records reveal more about prosecution and administration than about crime itself. A rise in recorded cases may mean more crime, better reporting, stronger institutions, or all three tangled together. The parchment is valuable, but it does not tell every secret. You pause near a wooden bridge where water moves slowly beneath reeds. The place seems peaceful, but bridges attract law. They carry tolls, travellers, goods, ambushes, and arguments. To control a bridge is to control movement. To punish violence near a bridge is to defend commerce and authority together. Even landscape becomes legal when power looks at it long enough. The same is true of forests. Royal forests are not simply wild places full of deer. They are zones of privilege, regulation, and punishment. To take the king's deer is not the same as taking any animal, because the deer belongs to a protected order of status and pleasure. Forest law could become intensely resented, especially when hungry people watch noble animals graze under royal protection. Apparently, even the deer had better legal representation than many peasants, yet that jest has a bitter root. Where rank and sacred kingship shape law, punishment may defend symbols more fiercely than bodies. A forbidden hunt can matter because it violates privilege. An insult to authority can matter because it threatens hierarchy. A breach of peace can matter because peace is claimed from above, not negotiated equally from below. You begin to see why cruelty could carry a royal logic. The ruler must appear able to protect, punish, pardon, and remember. Too much softness might look like weakness. Too much violence might breed hatred. Between those dangers, medieval authority walks carefully, though not always wisely. The scaffold, the fine, the prison, the mutilated body, and the royal pardon all belong to this dance. By late afternoon, light stretches over the road in pale bands. The town lies behind the hedges, but its laws seem to follow you. They follow in the toll gate, in the sheriff's summons, in the oath, in the seal, in the fear of being named. The king's peace is invisible, yet it changes how every crime is understood. A broken skull is a tragedy. A stolen purse is a loss. A road robbery is a danger to all travellers. Treason is a wound imagined in the body of the realm. Once crime becomes an attack on order itself, punishment becomes a ritual of repair, and repair, in this world, can be merciless. The lane narrows into a place where the town keeps its harsher memories. A post stands near the meeting of two roads, darkened by weather and touched by hundreds of passing glances. Beyond it, a low wall gathers moss along its stones. The air smells of cold iron, damp rope, and the faint sweetness of crushed grass. Nothing here announces itself loudly, yet the place seems arranged to be noticed. You understand, slowly, that punishment does not always end when the pain ends. Sometimes the sentence is designed to remain, a mark on the skin, a missing ear, a scar across the face, a branded letter, or a body displayed at a boundary can continue speaking long after the officials have gone home. In medieval justice, the body may become a document. It can be read by strangers. This is one of the most unsettling ideas in the history of punishment. Modern records usually live in files, databases, court archives, and sealed folders. Medieval records may live in flesh. If a person is branded for theft, the mark follows him into taverns, markets, fields, marriages, and every future accusation. The punishment travels with the punished, turning the body into a portable court record. The skin remembers publicly. There is no privacy in a scar. Legal records from medieval England and continental Europe confirm the use of mutilation and branding in certain places and periods, though the exact patterns varied greatly by law code, ruler, and offence. Researchers at universities such as Stanford and Oxford have examined these practices through court rolls, statutes, and chronicles, showing that bodily marking often carried both practical and symbolic meanings. The injured body identified the offender, warned the community, and declared that authority had acted. You walk closer to the post and imagine the people who once passed it. A servant with a burned mark at the thumb, a man with one ear cut away, a woman whose hair had been shorn for public shame, a thief whose hand was damaged so that his crimes seemed written into his future labour. These things sound almost unbearably harsh, but within that world they could be framed as alternatives to death. Not mercy as you would wish to receive it, but mercy in a colder register. The logic is grim. A dead thief steals no more, but neither does he work, repay, or serve as a living warning. A marked thief continues breathing, and every breath carries the memory of punishment. Medieval authority often prefers examples that walk. It is economical, visible, and quietly horrifying, which is a very medieval combination. Mutilation also fits a symbolic imagination that connects body parts with moral failure. A hand may be punished for theft, a tongue may be threatened for false speech, an ear may be cut for repeated dishonesty or defiance. The body is treated as a map of wrongdoing, and punishment corrects the place where sin seems to have acted. That idea feels strange now, but it had a rough moral poetry to medieval minds. A rough poetry can still be cruel. The body becomes the sentence. You pass a butcher's stall where cleavers hang in careful order. The iron shines from use, not beauty. Nearby, a child stares at a man whose face bears an old scar. The mother turns the child away, but not before the lesson enters. No official has spoken. No clerk has opened a roll. The scar has done its work silently. that silence matters. Bodily marks allow punishment to extend beyond the day of judgment. A town may forget the details, but it sees the sign. A traveller may never know the original case, but he understands danger or disgrace. The mark does not explain fairly. It does not include circumstances, hunger, false accusation, repentance, or regret. It simply declares, this is where cruelty becomes especially dangerous. A marked body can trap a person inside one act forever, even when the act was minor, misunderstood, or born from desperation. Punishment may claim to restore order, but it can also prevent return. The offender survives, yet may never fully re-enter the community. The law spares the life and wounds the future. A curious fringe tidbit appears in stories surrounding execution sites and displayed remains. Some people believe that parts of the bodies of executed criminals held strange medicinal or magical power. In later medieval and early modern folklore, bones, blood, or fat from the condemned could be treated as uncanny substances. It is an uncomfortable reminder that punishment did not always produce sober moral reflection. Sometimes it produced superstition, opportunism, and the peculiar human talent for making everything weird. Displayed bodies carried a similar message on a larger scale. A head placed on a gate, a corpse left near a road, or remains set at a crossroads turned death into geography. Authority marked the landscape with examples. The road itself seemed to warn travellers. The gate seemed to announce the fate of betrayal. The boundary between town and wilderness could become a boundary between obedience and terror. In cases of treason, display could be especially severe because the crime was imagined as an attack on the ruler and the realm. The body might be divided, sent to different towns, and made to speak across distance. It is difficult to think about calmly, yet the underlying political message is plain. The ruler's enemies are not only defeated, they are converted into warnings that travel where living messengers might not be trusted. Scholars continue to debate how often ordinary people interpreted such bodily punishments as justice, fear, entertainment, or spiritual warning. Some historians argue that public mutilation reflected shared assumptions about honour, sin, and visible correction. Others emphasize the coercive nature of the display, noting that a punished body could silence dissent by showing exactly what power could do. The same scar may have meant justice to one viewer, pity to another, and anger to someone standing quietly at the back. You move toward the town gate as evening gathers under the beams. Gates are useful things. They admit carts, travellers, taxes, news, and infection, which is a rather mixed selection. They also frame power. A displayed head or limb at a gate is not placed there only because many people pass through. It is placed there because entering the town should feel like entering the reach of law. The smell here is sharper. Tar, smoke, wet wood, and animals pressed close beneath the archway. A guard leans on a spear with the bored dignity of someone who has decided boredom is professional. Above him, the empty space where a warning might hang seems heavy with possibility. The architecture itself appears to wait for a message. Body punishment also intersects with status. A noble offender may seek execution by a cleaner method, one thought more honourable. A common offender may face hanging, branding, whipping, or mutilation. The body reveals rank even in suffering. Medieval justice does not pretend all bodies carry the same social meaning. Some bodies are treated as vessels of lineage, others are treated as tools, warnings, or disposable matter. That inequality deepens the cruelty. Pain is not distributed evenly. Shame is not interpreted evenly. A scar on a powerful man might become a story of rebellion or tragic pride. A scar on a poor labourer might become proof that he should never be trusted again. The mark does not merely describe the past. It shapes the future that others allow. And yet, even in this harsh system, meaning is unstable. A branded person may be feared, but also pitied. A mutilated rebel may be condemned by officials, but remembered by supporters as brave. A displayed body meant to crush memory may accidentally create legend. Power writes on the body, but it cannot always control how the writing is read. The sky darkens into a bruised violet above the roofs. Candles begin to glow behind shutters. The town gate stands like a mouth between safety and uncertainty. You feel how medieval punishment turns flesh into warning, shame into evidence, and death into public architecture. It is not cruelty without thought. That may be the most troubling part. It is cruelty with a system. A body can suffer once. A warning can last for years. Beneath the town, below the clean face of law and the noisy surface of judgment, there are rooms where daylight arrives only as a rumour. You descend a short flight of uneven steps, and the air changes at once. It thickens around you, tasting of wet stone, stale straw, old breath, and the sour trace of fear that no sweeping can fully remove. A wooden door stands ahead, strapped with iron. Its hinges seem too large for the passage, as though the door has become more important than the people behind it. A guard lifts a lamp. The flame bends in the draught and shows walls sweating with moisture. Somewhere in the dark, a chain moves softly, not dramatically, just enough to remind you that someone is awake. The dungeon is not always what imagination expects. Not every prison is a deep pit beneath a castle tower. Some are rooms inside gatehouses, town halls, monasteries, manor houses, or towers built for defence and later adapted for confinement. Yet the feeling remains similar: stone, waiting, uncertainty. Punishment may not have been pronounced, but suffering has already begun. That is the hidden cruelty of confinement. It starts before the sentence. Medieval prison records and administrative accounts show that many prisoners were held while awaiting trial, payment, transfer, ransom, or royal instruction. Historians at Oxford and Yale have examined jail delivery records, castle accounts, and civic documents, revealing that imprisonment often functioned less as a final penalty and more as a temporary restraint. Yet temporary could still mean hunger, sickness, debt, and dread. A delay can become its own punishment when the walls are cold enough. You step closer to the barred opening. Inside, figures sit or lie on straw that has been used too long. One man keeps his cloak wrapped tightly around his shoulders. Another whispers to himself with the patience of someone bargaining with heaven. A third stares at the lamp, not with hope, exactly, but with a weary interest in anything that changes. There are no neat cells with clean bedding. A medieval holding place may be crowded, filthy, and poorly supplied. Prisoners often depend on friends, family, charity, or their own money for food and comfort. Those without support sink quickly. A wealthy captive can purchase better conditions, wine, candles, sometimes even visitors. A poor captive may discover that stone is very democratic in temperature but not in treatment. Money follows people into darkness. It always has excellent shoes. A jailer may charge fees for entry, release, bedding, irons, or food. That sounds absurd until you remember that many offices in medieval society carry opportunities for profit. The prisoner becomes not only a legal subject, but a source of income. Every delay, every chain, every mouthful may cost something. Justice, in this form, develops a small marketplace under the stairs. A mainstream historical fact appears clearly in English records from the late medieval period. Periodic jail deliveries sent judges to clear prisons by trying accumulated cases, because prisoners could otherwise remain confined for long stretches. Scholars at Cambridge and major legal history institutes have used these records to understand crime, procedure, and the burden of custody. The very need for such deliveries tells you something. The prison was not a place where time behaved kindly. The darkness changes sound. A cough seems larger. A drip from the ceiling becomes a clock. Footsteps in the passage create sudden attention, because each footstep might mean food, questioning, transfer, release, or death. Waiting sharpens the nerves. You begin to understand how confinement punishes through uncertainty as much as through iron. The person inside does not control the day. He does not know whether witnesses will arrive. He does not know whether a lord will intervene. He does not know whether illness will take him before judgment does. In a world of slow travel and uneven records, a human being can become misplaced inside procedure. The dungeon is where bureaucracy grows damp. A quirky tidbit from medieval prison life survives in complaints and local customs. Some prisoners tried to earn small comforts by making objects, begging through barred openings, singing for alms, or calling to passers-by near street-level windows. A jail could become oddly porous, with voices leaking into the town above. Imagine buying onions while someone under the wall asks politely for bread. Medieval life did not always separate misery from errands, yet the social meaning of prison differs from modern expectations. Long-term imprisonment is not the standard punishment for most crimes in much of medieval Europe. Fines, public shame, corporal penalties, exile, and execution are more common as final responses. Prison often holds the accused until the law decides what else to do. This makes it liminal, a place between accusation and fate, between the ordinary world and the formal answer of authority. That in-between state can be terrifying. You're not yet fully condemned, but you're no longer free. You may still hope, but your body is already paying. The law has taken your movement, your sleep, your cleanliness, and your sense of time. Even if you leave, you do not leave untouched. Scholars still debate how representative surviving prison records are, because documents often preserve exceptional cases, official accounts, or places tied to stronger administration. Some historians warn that the poorest confinements may be least visible in the archive. Others use archaeological evidence, building remains, and financial records to reconstruct the texture of custody. The question remains open, because darkness rarely files complete paperwork. The lamp travels along the corridor, showing hooks, rings, and a bucket in the corner. The smell makes you want to breathe through your sleeve. A rat slips between stones with absolute confidence, as though it has more legal rights than the occupants. Perhaps it does. No one appears to be charging the rat for straw. You notice how the dungeon presses on identity. Outside, a person is a baker, widow, shepherd, apprentice, clerk, daughter, or stranger. Inside, the person becomes a prisoner first. Names matter less than charges, debts, and orders. Clothing soils, hair tangles, illness blurs the face, shame grows in the body. The confined are made to feel the distance between themselves and the community that continues above them. This distance is useful to authority. To imprison someone is to remove disorder from sight, but not entirely. The town knows the jail is there. The family knows where the missing person has gone. Rumour knows everything, or pretends to. The prison beneath the gate or beside the hall becomes a storage place for unresolved fear. Some captives are not common criminals at all. Prison may hold debtors, political hostages, prisoners of war, suspected heretics, troublesome nobles, or people waiting on disputes of property and allegiance. Medieval confinement serves many masters. It is law, negotiation, intimidation, bookkeeping, and sometimes revenge in a cloak. You pause near a small opening where pale daylight enters from far above. Dust turns inside it like slow ash. For one moment, the prison seems almost still. Then someone coughs. Someone shifts. Someone mutters a prayer too tired to be formal. The human body continues making its claims. Hunger, warmth, clean water, a voice from outside. Those small needs reveal the core of the cruelty. A grand execution may shock the crowd, but confinement erodes quietly. It makes pain private, repetitive, and dependent on others. No trumpet announces the suffering of a person kept 3 extra weeks because a clerk is absent or a fee cannot be paid. No crowd gathers for the fever that begins in damp straw. The guard lowers the lamp. The iron door waits to close again. You feel the passage narrowing behind you, not because the walls have moved, but because you have understood their purpose. They do not only hold bodies, they hold uncertainty until authority is ready to use it. Above, bells ring in the town. Below, time has no mercy. The chamber of questioning is warmer than the dungeon, but not kinder. A brazier glows in the corner, giving off the smell of charcoal, hot metal, and wool dampened by nervous sweat. The walls are plain. The table is heavy. A clerk sits with sharpened quill and careful fingers, ready to turn trembling speech into official memory. You hear no great storm of violence at first, only voices. A question is asked. A denial follows. Another question circles closer. A name is repeated with patience that feels almost worse than anger. Medieval interrogation often begins in this quiet way, with authority trying to make the accused speak in a form the court can use. The search is not only for facts, it is for confession. To modern ears, confession belongs to guilt, pressure, faith, fear, therapy, and police drama, all tangled together. In medieval courts, confession could carry special force because words spoken by the accused seemed to reveal the hidden truth directly. A witness might lie, a neighbour might gossip, a rumour might drift like smoke, but a confession appeared to come from inside the locked room of the soul. That belief made confession powerful, and power makes people dangerous. Legal historians at Oxford, Cambridge, and major American universities have studied medieval procedure across Europe, especially the growing influence of written inquiry and learned law. Their research shows that torture was never a single universal practice across all medieval courts. It varied by region, century, court type, and legal tradition. Yet where it appeared, it rested on a chilling assumption. Pain could force secrecy to open. The room seems to lean closer around that thought. A rope lies coiled near the wall. Iron restraints rest on a bench. Nothing needs to move for the message to be understood. Threat can work before touch. The imagination is already an instrument, and it knows its craft too well. The officials may not think of themselves as cruel. That is important and uncomfortable. They may think they are seeking truth for the protection of souls and society. They may believe that stubborn silence allows disorder to survive. They may tell themselves that pain, carefully regulated, can serve justice better than uncertainty. Human beings have always been skilled at dressing fear in formal clothing. A mainstream historical fact can be traced in continental legal traditions. From the 13th century onward, Roman canon procedures influenced many European courts, encouraging written records, judicial inquiry, and in some contexts, controlled use of torture. Scholars connected with Yale and the University of Chicago have examined these developments in legal history. They show that torture often entered systems that prized procedure, not systems without rules. That makes the matter darker. Rules did not prevent cruelty. Sometimes rules organized it. The medieval use of torture usually required suspicion, limits, and official supervision, at least in theory. A judge might need partial proof before applying pain. A confession under torture might need later confirmation. Procedure tried to distinguish lawful inquiry from uncontrolled violence. Yet theory lives on parchment, while bodies live in rooms. The distance between the two can be very wide. You stand beside the table and imagine the accused watching the clerk. The clerk is not holding a weapon. He's holding a quill, which may be worse in the long term. Pain may pass. A written confession may remain. Copied, filed, repeated, and treated as truth by people who never heard the scream that shaped it. The belief behind torture is almost mechanical. The body is pressed and truth is expected to emerge. Yet the body is not a lock with a hidden key. It is a frightened creature that seeks relief. Under enough pressure, people may say what is true, what is false, what is expected, or what they think will stop the pain. Medieval officials sometimes knew this risk, which is why procedures tried to control confession. Still, the risk remained like a crack in the foundation. Scholars continue to debate how common torture truly was in medieval criminal justice. Some argue that popular imagination greatly exaggerates its daily use, especially for ordinary crimes in places where juries and local accusation mattered more. Others point to inquisitorial courts, political trials, and witchcraft procedures where coercive questioning became deeply consequential. The truth depends on where you stand, which century you enter, and whose records survive the damp. You hear the accused breathe. It is a small sound, but in this chamber it becomes central. The officials wait. Waiting can be part of pressure. Silence may invite memory, dread, or surrender. The person at the table must decide whether truth, denial, or invention offers the safest path. None may be safe. A peculiar fringe tidbit from medieval and early modern belief concerns ordeal and divine signs. Earlier traditions sometimes tested guilt through hot iron, water, or other rituals believed to reveal God's judgment. After the Church restricted clerical participation in ordeals, legal systems increasingly turned toward testimony, investigation, and confession. Some later observers imagined torture as a rational improvement, which is a sentence that should make anyone stare quietly into the middle distance. The movement from ordeal to inquiry did not simply replace superstition with humanity. It replaced one kind of terrifying certainty with another. Instead of asking God to reveal truth through a ritual, officials increasingly asked procedure to reveal truth through questions, records, pressure, and sometimes pain. The medieval courtroom became more literate, more organized, and not always more merciful. The smell of wax smoke drifts from a candle near the clerk's hand. Its flame gutters each time someone shifts. The accused looks toward the door, perhaps imagining the street outside, perhaps not daring to imagine it. Outside, people bargain and cook and complain about rain. Inside, truth is being hunted as though it were an animal cornered under floorboards. There is also a spiritual dimension. Confession matters deeply in Christian life, where admitting sin can prepare the soul for penance, absolution, or death. Legal confession borrows some of that weight, even when the setting is harsh. To confess is not merely to provide information. It is to stand exposed before human and divine judgment. A forced confession therefore wounds more than the body. It invades the moral self. This invasion explains why torture could be defended and feared at the same time. It promised access to hidden truth, but it also threatened to manufacture falsehood. It gave judges confidence, yet sometimes produced stories too neat, too strange, or too pleasing to authority. In trials involving conspiracy, heresy, treason, or witchcraft, pain could encourage networks of accusation. One name becomes two become 10. Fear breeds patterns that may not exist. The chamber fills with invisible pressure. Not every person questioned here is guilty. Not every official is sadistic. Not every confession is false. The horror lies in the uncertainty. Once pain enters the search for truth, truth itself becomes harder to recognize. The court may believe it has gained clarity while actually listening to terror speak. You notice how the tools remain still for long periods. Their stillness is part of their power. A rope unused can still persuade. Iron resting on a table can still alter memory. The accused may confess before being touched, not because guilt rises naturally, but because the future has become unbearable. Authority often works through what it might do, not only through what it does. The clerk dips his quill again. Ink glistens in the dim light. Every word must be shaped into legal form, flattened into sentences that later readers can trust. Yet the chamber contains more than sentences. It contains pulse, heat, dread, hesitation, and the terrible human desire for suffering to stop. This is why torture remains one of the most troubling parts of medieval punishment. It claims to serve justice, but it can corrupt the very truth justice needs. It claims to uncover hidden guilt, but it may plant new lies in the mouth of the desperate. It claims control, but pain is an unstable servant. The brazier settles with a soft crack. The quill moves, and the room waits for truth to sound exactly like fear. The road turns toward a cathedral town, where stone rises higher than any private house, and the bells seem to speak from inside the clouds. You feel the change before you reach the gate. The air carries incense, wet limestone, candle wax, and the faint green scent of herbs crushed beneath many sandals. Voices lower as people approach the church, even those who were gossiping rather enthusiastically a moment ago. Here, punishment enters another kind of fear. Not only fear of theft, rebellion, or violence. Fear of error. Fear of corruption. Fear that a wrong belief might move through a town like sickness, passing from mouth to mouth, table to table, bed to cradle. In such a world, heresy is not simply an opinion. It can be imagined as a danger to salvation itself. That thought makes the air colder. A soul is at stake. You step into the nave, where coloured light falls across pillars like water through jewels. A priest moves near the altar. A woman kneels with her hands pressed so tightly together that her knuckles pale. A man crosses himself with the quick seriousness of someone who knows death is patient. Medieval Christianity is not a decoration placed on society. It is the deep structure through which many people understand birth, illness, weather, kingship, harvest, marriage, law, and the grave. So religious punishment must be understood within that universe. If the community believes eternal life can be endangered by false teaching, then heresy becomes more frightening than ordinary crime. A thief may steal bread. A heretic, in this imagination, may steal heaven. That belief does not soften the cruelty. It explains why cruelty could appear as protection. Records from church councils, episcopal registers, and inquisitorial documents show that medieval authorities developed formal procedures for investigating heresy, especially from the 12th century onward. Scholars at Princeton, Yale, and Oxford have studied these records to understand how religious dissent was identified, questioned, corrected, and punished. The picture is complex. Many cases involved penance, reconciliation, imprisonment, or public confession rather than death. Yet the possibility of fire remained, and it carried enormous symbolic power. Fire is not chosen by accident. It consumes, it purifies, it terrifies. It leaves ash where a body had been, offering the watching crowd a brutal image of corruption destroyed. In the religious imagination of the time, burning can be framed as cleansing, even while the human reality remains agonizing. That contradiction sits at the center of the horror. The cathedral bells sound again. Their music rolls across roofs and market stalls, reminding everyone that time belongs to God. The same bells that call people to prayer can also gather them for judgment. A sacred sound can become the opening note of public fear. History has many such double uses, because human beings rarely leave powerful symbols alone. A mainstream historical fact stands firmly in the records. In 1215, the Fourth Lateran Council helped define church discipline and pastoral reform across Western Christendom, strengthening expectations around confession, teaching, and clerical oversight. Historians at major universities often treat this council as central to medieval religious life. It did not create the persecution of heresy by itself, but it belonged to a wider movement that made belief more supervised and organized. You walk through a side door into a courtyard where officials might gather, not with torches at first, but with documents. The quieter beginning matters. Heresy trials often involve questioning, testimony, confession, correction, and the hope of repentance. The system wants the accused to return to orthodoxy. At least, that is what it says about itself. The path may begin with words, not flames. Yet words can become traps. A phrase repeated badly, a doctrine misunderstood, a refusal to swear, a neighbour's accusation sharpened by old resentment. Religious language is subtle. and many ordinary people live inside faith more through ritual and habit than precise theology. When officials demand clarity, the frightened may stumble. In a society where salvation is serious, a stumble can echo. A quirky tidbit from medieval religious culture concerns trial by suspicious reputation. Some people gained attention not because they preached grand systems, but because they avoided church rites, mocked clergy, owned unusual books, or gathered in small groups at awkward hours. Medieval neighbours, being neighbours, could turn curiosity into suspicion with impressive speed. Apparently, even in the age of candles, people had a talent for comment sections. The fear of heresy often intensifies during crisis. War, famine, plague, political conflict or clerical scandal can make communities more eager to identify hidden causes of disorder. When suffering feels too large to explain, people may search for secret corruption beneath the surface. A dissenting preacher, a wandering mystic, or a stubborn local group can become the face of anxiety that already exists. Scholars still debate how far medieval heresy was a widespread popular movement, and how far church authorities helped create the categories they claim to discover. Some historians emphasize genuine dissenting communities with alternative beliefs and practices. Others argue that inquisitorial records reflect the questions, fears, and language of officials as much as the voices of the accused. The archive speaks, but it speaks through power. That is especially important here. When a confession is recorded, whose words are preserved? The accused person's thoughts, the clerk's phrasing, the examiner's categories, or some uneasy mixture of all three? Religious punishment depends on naming invisible error. Yet invisible things are difficult to prove. Belief cannot be weighed like grain. Doubt cannot be measured like cloth. The soul leaves no fingerprint on the altar rail. You stand near a chapel where candle flames tremble in rows. Each flame looks gentle alone, but together they make a field of watchful light. A priest speaks softly to a penitent. The scene is tender, almost comforting. Then you remember that the same institution which offers forgiveness can also declare exclusion. The church can heal, teach, shelter, feed, and condemn. Medieval life often holds care and coercion inside the same stone walls. Public penance shows this mixture clearly. A person accused of religious error might be required to wear special clothing, carry a candle, stand before the congregation, recite confession, or make pilgrimage. Such punishments are meant to restore, but they also shame. The body becomes visible again, marked not with scars, but with signs of correction. The community sees the wandering sheep brought back, though the sheep may feel more inspected than embraced. For those judged obstinate, the path darkens. Church courts generally do not carry out execution directly. The condemned heretic may be handed to secular authority, which performs the final violence. This separation allows religious officials to preserve a formal distance from bloodshed while still making the fatal judgment possible. It is a legal and moral arrangement that feels very neat on parchment and very terrible in the street. The fire itself is both punishment and message. It says that error cannot remain. It says the community has rejected spiritual danger. It says authority can reach beyond conduct into belief. For the crowd, the scene may inspire fear, approval, pity, confusion, or private doubt. Public certainty does not guarantee private agreement. A person can kneel with everyone else and still wonder in silence. The wind moves through the courtyard, carrying ash from a baker's oven nearby. For a moment, ordinary fire and punitive fire share the same smell. One warms bread, one destroys a body. The difference lies not in the element, but in the meaning people give it. Medieval punishment often turns ordinary things into instruments of terror: rope, wood, water, iron, flame. The world itself becomes available to judgment. You begin to sense why religious cruelty could be so intense. It claims to protect more than property. It claims to protect eternity. It claims to defend God's order, communal unity, and the fragile hope of salvation. When a society believes the next world matters more than this one, the body can be sacrificed in the name of the soul. That is the logic, and it is chilling. The cathedral doors open, and late light falls across the threshold. People pass in and out, carrying worries, prayers, secrets, and crumbs from market bread. Some fear thieves, some fear illness, some fear their own thoughts. Above them, carved saints stare down with calm stone eyes, as if they have watched every form of human certainty become dangerous. The bells soften, the smoke thins, and in the hush beneath the tower, you feel how belief can comfort a frightened world, and also teach that cruelty is mercy when the soul is said to be burning first. A narrow lane leads away from the cathedral walls and into the private weather of households. Here, justice speaks in quieter tones, but its cruelty can be just as sharp. Linen dries above the street. A cat slips beneath a bench. From an open doorway comes the smell of boiled herbs, wool smoke, and bread baked too dark at the edge. Somewhere, a cradle creaks in rhythm with a woman's tired foot. You enter a world where reputation clings to the body like damp cloth. For women especially, public honour can be fragile, watched, discussed, and damaged by voices that never enter a courtroom. A glance at the wrong door, a rumour after sunset, a quarrel in the market, a pregnancy outside marriage, or a wife accused of speaking too boldly can all become matters of correction. Not always by death, often by shame. Shame is a quieter blade. It cuts socially. Medieval law and custom often treated women through the expectations of household order, sexual morality, marriage, obedience, and public speech. Records from church courts in England and France show many cases involving defamation, adultery, fornication, marital disputes, and accusations surrounding reputation. Historians at Cambridge, Yale, and Stanford have studied these records to reconstruct women's daily lives, revealing not silence, but constant negotiation within a watchful society. You pass a doorway where two women speak in low voices over a basket of mending. Their words move quickly, then stop when footsteps approach. Gossip is not merely entertainment here. Although, let us be honest, it is certainly that too. Gossip can defend norms, spread warnings, settle grudges, and prepare accusations before any official hears them. It is social surveillance with better posture and worse restraint. For many women, reputation is practical survival. A damaged name may threaten marriage prospects, credit, trade, household standing, or protection from kin. In a society where legal identity is often tied to family and status, public speech can change a person's future. To be called unchaste, dishonest, quarrelsome, or disobedient is not only embarrassing, it may become economically dangerous. Church courts frequently handled sexual and marital matters, because marriage was a sacrament and moral conduct belonged to religious oversight. A woman accused of fornication might face penance, fines, public confession, or ritual shame. A man could also be punished for sexual misconduct. But the burden of reputation often fell differently. Female sexuality was watched with a special anxiety because it touched inheritance, legitimacy, household honour, and male control. That double standard is not subtle. History rarely bothers hiding it. A mainstream historical fact appears in the surviving church court records of late medieval England. Cases of defamation often involved women suing other women or men for words that damaged sexual reputation. Scholars at Oxford and American research universities have used these cases to show that women were not only passive victims of gossip, they actively defended their good name in court when the system allowed it. This matters because medieval women were not simply silent figures dragged through punishment by men. They worked, traded, brewed ale, managed households, raised children, sued neighbours, testified, inherited in certain contexts, and fought for reputation. Yet their agency operated inside hard limits. A system can allow a person to speak and still punish her harshly for speaking too much. The punishment for female disorder often favoured humiliation, devices associated with scolding, public quarrels, or sexual misconduct could place women before the crowd as examples of failed obedience. In some towns, women accused of being scolds were paraded, ducked, or displayed with objects meant to ridicule speech. These practices varied widely, and some belong more strongly to later periods. Yet the impulse is medieval in spirit. The unruly voice must be made visible, laughable, and controlled. A quirky tidbit survives in records and folklore around punishments for disorderly speech. Some communities used noisy processions, pots, pans, bells, and mocking songs to shame people involved in marital conflict or sexual scandal. This rough music could be directed at women, men, or mismatched couples. It was community theatre with terrible manners. Apparently, medieval neighbours could turn moral judgment into a percussion section. You hear that possibility in the lane, the clatter of tin and laughter turning sour. The punished person may be forced to endure noise, mockery, and exposure, while every window becomes an eye. Such punishment does not need deep wounds. It works by making the home impossible to hide inside. Private failure is dragged into public sound. This reveals an important layer of medieval cruelty. Punishment often targeted relationships, not only bodies. It could make a woman less marriageable, less trusted, less protected, and less able to trade. It could make her husband ashamed, her children mocked, her household watched. The sentence spreads through kinship. The entire domestic world trembles. The legal treatment of women also changed according to status. A noblewoman accused of sexual misconduct might be handled through family negotiation, enclosure, annulment disputes, or political pressure. A poorer woman might face public penance or open shame. A servant might have little defence if accused by an employer or master. Social rank shapes the form of disgrace, because shame falls differently from high windows and low doorways. Scholars continue to debate how strongly medieval gender punishments reflected male authority. Communal self-regulation, religious morality, or economic anxiety. Some historians stress patriarchal control over women's bodies and voices. Others emphasize women's participation in policing reputation, noting that accusations often came from female neighbours, whose own honour depended on communal standards. The truth is not simple, which is rude of it, but useful. The same woman might be controlled by a system, and also use that system against another person. A wife might suffer from patriarchal expectations and still bring a defamation case to protect her standing. A widow might be vulnerable and economically independent at the same time. Medieval gender is not a flat picture. It is a crowded room with rules, loopholes, witnesses, and a great many opinions. You step into a small courtyard where herbs grow in chipped pots. Sage, rue, and rosemary release scent under your hand. This domestic space feels gentle, but it is also a site of discipline. The household is a moral unit. The husband is expected to govern. The wife is expected to labour, obey, manage, and reproduce respectably. Children, servants, apprentices, and lodgers all belong to a hierarchy. Disorder inside the house is thought to leak outward into the street. That is why scolding, adultery, and sexual rumour matter so much. They are imagined as cracks in household order. If the household fails, the community fears wider disorder. If wives challenge husbands openly, if servants disobey, if pregnancies blur inheritance, if gossip becomes uncontrollable, then the social pattern seems to fray. Punishment steps in not only to correct acts, but to restore hierarchy. You notice how often the female body becomes evidence. Pregnancy, clothing, hair, gestures, and public presence all carry meaning. A woman's covered head may signal respectability. Loose hair may signal shame or penance. Special garments may mark correction. The body becomes a surface on which the community writes its expectations. It is a familiar pattern, but here it carries a gendered edge. Yet pity and solidarity also exist. A woman punished in public may find silent support among those who know the accusation is unfair, exaggerated, or driven by spite. A neighbour may bring food. A sister may stand nearby. A mother may teach a daughter how to survive reputational danger with careful speech and sharper memory. Cruel systems do not erase human tenderness. They make tenderness quieter. Even the courts reveal complexity. Church courts could discipline women, but they could also offer a forum for marital claims, unpaid promises, defamation suits, and protection of certain rights. A woman could accuse a man of breaking a marriage promise. She could challenge slander. She could call witnesses. The system did not treat her equally, but it did not always treat her as invisible. That distinction is uncomfortable, but important. Dust settles over the lane, turning linen grey and windows gold. Voices soften behind shutters. A woman laughs inside one house, brief and bright, then lowers her voice as someone passes. You feel how punishment reaches into speech, desire, marriage, rumour, and domestic labour. Cruelty here is often less spectacular than fire or iron, but it lingers in the social skin. A body may heal from the pillory, a reputation may not. The road outside the town gate lies pale beneath the morning mist, and the people moving along it seem thinner than the shadows they cast. A boy carries a bundle tied with cord. A woman walks with a bowl hidden beneath her cloak. A man with a patched sleeve keeps his eyes low, not from guilt exactly, but from long practice in being noticed by the wrong people. Here the world opens, yet safety becomes less certain. Fields stretch beyond hedges, but access to them belongs to someone. Woods stand dark and full of promise, but even fallen branches may be claimed by custom, lordship, or forest law. The hungry hand reaches toward what the eye can see, and the law answers with a hardness shaped by property, fear, and rank. Poverty walks everywhere. It leaves few records. You smell wet grass, sheep dung, cold ashes, and the faint sweetness of apples rotting beyond a fence. Such scents belong to survival, not romance. A medieval poor person does not merely lack luxury. He may lack margin. One sickness, one failed harvest, one dead animal, one unpaid rent, and a household can slide from difficulty into desperation. In that slide, theft may feel less like rebellion than breathing. Yet the law rarely breathes with him. Records from medieval court rolls show repeated prosecutions for theft of animals, cloth, tools, food, money, and household goods. Historians at Oxford, Yale, and major American research centres have studied these records to understand the lives of the poor, especially those who appear only when accused, fined, taxed, or buried. The evidence is uneven, but it makes one thing clear. The poor were not outside the legal system. They were often pressed hardest by it. A stolen sheep can bring severe consequences because the sheep is not only meat, it is wool, milk, breeding, manure, rent, and future value wrapped in a nervous animal. A stolen horse can threaten travel, ploughing, and status. A stolen tool can stop work entirely. The punishment may seem cruel when measured only against the object, but the medieval mind measures the object through everything it supports. That does not make the punishment just. It makes the fear legible. You pass a ditch where a barefoot child digs for edible greens. Nearby, a reeve rides by with a staff across his saddle, watching fences and workers. The gap between hunger and ownership lies only a few steps wide. A hedge can separate necessity from crime. A fallen branch gathered from the wrong wood may become an offence. A rabbit snared in the wrong field may become more than a meal. Medieval poverty is not one condition. There are landless labourers, villains with obligations, widows, orphans, servants between households, migrants, beggars, disabled veterans, failed apprentices, and seasonal workers. Some are known locally and receive charity. Others are strangers, and strangers bring unease. A familiar poor person may be pitied. A wandering poor person may be feared. This distinction matters deeply. Charity is praised by the Church, and almsgiving can help the soul of the giver. But suspicion shadows the able-bodied beggar, the traveller with no clear master, and the labourer who moves when wages rise elsewhere. A person without stable ties seems difficult to supervise. In a society built on obligation, rootlessness looks like disorder. A mainstream historical fact appears in late medieval English labour laws. After the Black Death reduced the population in the 14th century, statutes attempted to control wages and restrict labour mobility. Scholars at Cambridge and Princeton have explored how these laws reveal elite anxiety about workers gaining bargaining power. The plague had changed the balance of labour, and authorities answered with regulation. Imagine the cruelty of that. Death has swept through villages, leaving empty beds, empty fields, and empty workshops. Survivors discover that their labour is suddenly more valuable. Then lawmakers attempt to hold wages down and bind workers to old terms. The poor are needed, but not freed. Their bodies become essential to recovery, while their choices are treated as dangerous. The hungry hand is punished not only for stealing, but for moving. A quirky tidbit from late medieval urban life concerns badges worn by some licensed beggars, or poor recipients of charity. In certain towns, permission to beg could be marked, controlled, or recorded, separating the deserving poor from the suspicious wanderer. Bureaucracy had begun sorting misery into categories, which is very organised and very bleak. Even compassion preferred paperwork when possible. The idea of the deserving poor is powerful. The elderly, sick, blind, orphaned, or locally known may receive more sympathy. The strong stranger may be accused of idleness. This distinction allows society to help some while punishing others. It also allows fear to disguise itself as moral judgment. A man may be starving, but if he looks capable of work, his hunger becomes suspicious. You hear a cart approach, heavy with sacks of grain. 2 men walk beside it, each holding a staff. Grain attracts attention because grain is life in portable form. It can be stolen, hidden, ground, sold, or used to pay rent. During shortage, grain becomes a symbol of both survival and resentment. Those who guard it know this. Those who lack it know it better. Theft by the poor could lead to whipping, branding, hanging, fines, or local shame, depending on value, reputation, place, and law. Many punishments were calibrated by thresholds of worth, though valuation itself could be contested. A small object might be valued low enough to avoid death, or high enough to invite it. The price of a thing could become the weight of a life. Scholars continue to debate whether harsh punishments against theft primarily protected property, deterred disorder, or reinforced class hierarchy. Some historians emphasize the practical vulnerability of households in a subsistence economy. Others argue that severe penalties taught the poor to respect ownership patterns that benefited landlords, merchants, and officials. Both interpretations may stand together, awkwardly but truthfully. Property was survival for some, and power for others. The road bends toward a woodland, where thin branches scratch the sky. Forest resources matter to the poor in countless ways: fuel, nuts, berries, grazing, timber, leaves, and game can soften hardship. But access is controlled through custom and law. The boundary between permitted use and theft may be known locally, disputed bitterly, or enforced selectively. A poor woman gathering sticks may be tolerated one year and punished the next. Selective enforcement is one of the quiet engines of cruelty. A rule that everyone technically breaks becomes a weapon when used against the weak, disliked, foreign, or inconvenient. The law does not need to strike all people equally to be effective. Sometimes it only needs everyone to know it could strike them. Fear grows well in uncertainty. You see a beggar near a chapel wall, holding out a wooden bowl. His face is lined, but not old enough for comfort. A passerby drops a crust into the bowl, then makes the sign of the cross. Charity and judgment pass each other in one movement. The giver helps, perhaps sincerely, perhaps for salvation, perhaps to quiet discomfort. The beggar receives, perhaps with gratitude, perhaps with resentment, perhaps with no energy for either. Cruelty toward the poor often comes from this uneasy mixture. Society needs the poor as labourers, fears them as thieves, pities them as Christians, and blames them as moral failures. The same hand that gives bread may applaud a whipping for stolen bread. The contradiction does not collapse the system, it sustains it. Inside towns, vagrancy laws and local ordinances try to manage who may remain, beg, work, or pass through. Masters worry about servants leaving, guilds worry about outsiders competing, officials worry about disorder near markets and gates. The poor body becomes a moving problem of administration. Where do you belong? Who answers for you? Who pays if you fall ill? Who punishes you if you steal? Those questions turn poverty into a legal condition. A settled poor person may be harshly watched. An unsettled poor person may be driven away. A hungry thief may be made into an example, precisely because others share his hunger. Punishment speaks to all those watching empty-handed at the edge of the crowd. It tells them that need will not excuse trespass against order. The mist lifts as the sun reaches the fields. Workers bend with sickles, their backs forming a slow pattern across the earth. They look small beneath the sky, yet the world depends on them. Grain, wool, rent, taxes, armies, households, and monasteries all rest on labouring bodies. Those bodies are valued, but not always honoured. Needed people are not always protected people. A woman passes with a bundle of sticks tied across her shoulders. Her hands are red from cold. She does not look criminal. She looks tired. Yet in the wrong wood, under the wrong rule, before the wrong official, tiredness may not be a defence. The law can turn necessity into guilt with remarkable speed. You continue along the road, listening to the soft grind of cartwheels. Behind every harsh sentence against thieves, beggars, and wanderers lies a society afraid of hunger becoming movement, and movement becoming disorder. Cruelty does not fall randomly here. It often lands where life is already thin. The poor steal because they need. The law punishes because it fears, and between those two truths, medieval justice grows cold enough to make a loaf of bread feel heavier than a stone. The manor house rises beyond a line of bare trees, its roof dark against a sky the colour of pewter. Smoke lifts from a great chimney, richer and steadier than the thin smoke from cottages below. You feel the difference at once. The road is smoother here. The gate is stronger. Even the dogs seem better fed, which is always a small political statement. A servant opens the outer door, and warm air slips out carrying the smell of beeswax, roasted meat, rushes, and wine. Inside, voices move beneath rafters blackened by years of firelight. Shields hang on the wall. A clerk sits near a chest of documents. A lord's household is not merely a home. It is an office, a court, a storehouse, a symbol, and a carefully arranged argument about who deserves obedience. Here, punishment changes shape. Rank bends the law. Medieval society does not imagine equality before justice in the modern sense. It imagines order through hierarchy. King, lord, knight, priest, merchant, artisan, labourer, servant, widow, stranger, child. Each place carries duties, protections, expectations, and vulnerabilities. The law may claim to defend peace, but it often sees people through status before it sees them as individuals. That does not mean nobles are immune from punishment. They can be fined, imprisoned, stripped of lands, exiled, executed, or destroyed politically. Yet the manner of punishment often reflects rank. A noble may receive a more honourable death, a formal trial, a chance of ransom, or treatment shaped by family connections. A poor offender may meet rope, branding, whipping, or exposure with far fewer cushions between body and sentence. Records from medieval aristocratic trials, royal courts, and parliamentary proceedings show that noble crime was often entangled with politics, inheritance, landholding, and loyalty. Historians at Oxford, Yale, and Harvard have examined these records to show that justice among elites could be severe, but rarely simple. Punishment for the powerful often aimed not only at guilt, but at reshaping the map of power. You walk through the hall and notice how many objects speak of lineage. The carved chair, the embroidered cloth, the sword above the hearth, the family seal pressed into wax. A noble body is not treated as merely one body. It represents bloodline, alliance, memory, and property. To punish such a person is to disturb networks of marriage, service, and obligation. So the system hesitates differently. It calculates, if a poor thief is hanged, the town loses one troubled labourer. If a great lord is executed, heirs, retainers, rivals, tenants, and enemies all move in response. The punishment may solve a problem or create several improved versions of it, which is rather inconsiderate of politics. Medieval rulers understand this. They may punish boldly, or they may bargain, delay, pardon, or confiscate lands while leaving the body alive. A mainstream historical fact stands clearly in medieval English history. Noble offenders accused of treason could face forfeiture of lands and titles as well as death, because treason struck at loyalty to the crown. Scholars at Cambridge and major American universities have studied attaindus, forfeiture, and political punishment as tools of royal authority. In these cases, justice reaches beyond the condemned person into inheritance itself. This is cruelty of another kind. A traitor may die once, but his family may lose estates, status, marriages, income, and future security. Punishment becomes dynastic. The name is wounded, the household falls, tenants may find a new lord over them, servants scatter. A single sentence can rearrange many lives that never stood in the dock. Yet noble privilege still matters. Some aristocrats expect beheading rather than hanging, because hanging is associated with shameful common death. The distinction may seem grotesque, since death remains death, but medieval honour notices the manner of dying. A blade can be framed as dignified. Rope can mark disgrace. The body's final posture becomes a social statement. You pause near the hearth, where firelight touches the polished edge of a cup. The wealthy can buy legal help, influence witnesses, petition patrons, pay fines, secure pardons, or negotiate surrender. Money does not guarantee safety, but it multiplies options. For the poor, options are often fewer and rougher. One person hires a skilled advocate. Another hopes his neighbour remembers the truth and is not too busy harvesting to say it. There is also benefit of clergy, a strange and important legal privilege that could remove certain accused persons from secular punishment if they qualified as clerics. Over time, literacy tests and clerical status created complicated pathways through justice. This privilege varied by period and place, but it shows how learning and church identity and status could alter punishment. A verse read correctly might help save a neck. Medieval justice sometimes had a remarkable respect for pronunciation under pressure. A quirky tidbit follows from this. The biblical passage used in some English literacy tests became known as the neck verse, because reading it could help an accused person escape the gallows. It sounds like a dark joke invented by exhausted law students, but it reflects a real overlap between literacy, privilege, and survival. In a world where many cannot read, letters themselves can become armour. Of course, not every literate person is noble, and not every noble is safe. Power attracts danger. The higher a person stands, the farther a fall may be staged. A noble punishment can be deliberately spectacular because it warns other elites. The king may need aristocrats, but he also needs them afraid enough to remain loyal. Treason trials, confiscations, and public execution send messages upward, not only downward. Scholars continue to debate whether medieval justice was fundamentally a class weapon or a layered system shaped by both hierarchy and genuine concern for order. Some historians emphasize inequality, showing how rank softened consequences for elites and sharpened them for the poor. Others note that high status could make political crimes far more dangerous because elite disobedience threatened the entire realm. Both views reveal part of the machinery. The system is unequal, but not simply gentle toward the powerful. A nobleman may suffer more formally, more ceremonially, and sometimes more permanently through loss of lineage. A poor woman may suffer more bodily and immediately through shame, whipping, or want. A merchant may be fined because he has money worth taking. A vagrant may be beaten because he has almost nothing else the system can seize. Punishment follows available value. That sentence is ugly. It is also useful. You step into a smaller chamber where legal papers are stored. Wax seals hang like hardened drops of blood. Charters, rents, obligations, pardons, and claims sleep in the chest until needed. Written power protects the literate and propertied. A person with documents can prove privilege. A person without documents may rely on memory, reputation, and witnesses, which are more fragile things. Even language creates distance. Latin, to your law French, and specialized legal terms shape proceedings that many ordinary people cannot fully understand. The powerful inhabit the language of judgment more comfortably. They may not control every outcome, but they recognize the room. The poor often enter that room as strangers even when the case concerns their own bodies. Status also shapes shame. A noble's disgrace may be recorded in chronicles, sung in political verse, or remembered for generations. That sounds terrible, and it is. Yet the chronicler may also preserve nuance, motive, and tragedy. The poor punished in a village square may vanish almost completely, remembered only as a name in a roll. If that, history itself can distribute dignity unevenly. You look through a narrow window toward the cottages beyond the manor ditch. Smoke rises from them in thinner lines. The people there may resent noble privilege, but they may also depend on noble protection, employment, charity, arbitration, and access to land. Medieval hierarchy is oppressive, yet interdependent. The lord needs workers. Workers need access. Priests need patrons. Patrons need legitimacy. Everyone is tied together, though not equally. Cruelty grows from these ties because punishment defends the arrangement. A servant who steals from a master violates trust inside hierarchy. A peasant who resists labour dues challenges lordship. A knight who betrays a king threatens feudal loyalty. Each offence is interpreted through the relationship it disturbs. Justice asks not only what happened, but who did it to whom. The hall quiets as evening darkens the beams above you. A cup is lifted, a steward speaks softly. Somewhere beyond the wall, a stable boy rubs warmth into his hands and waits for orders. Both the lord and the boy live under law, but not under the same weather. One may negotiate with clouds, the other is simply rained on. This inequality does not make medieval punishment chaotic. It makes it structured by rank, property, honour, and usefulness. The cruelty is not evenly poured. It runs along channels already cut into society. High blood can protect, but it can also make rebellion unforgivable. Low birth can obscure, but it can also leave the body exposed to punishments the powerful rarely touch. The fire settles into coals. The documents sleep in their chest. And beneath the polished language of honour and order, you sense a harsher truth. Medieval justice does not merely punish crime. It teaches everyone their place, and it teaches that place through the body, the purse, the name, and the fear of falling. At the edge of the town, where respectable houses begin to turn their backs, there is a smaller dwelling near the ditch and the waste ground. Smoke comes from its chimney, but fewer visitors cross its threshold. The door is sturdy, the shutters are closed, A few tools hang beneath the eaves, cleaned carefully and kept apart from ordinary trade. Even the road seems to give the place a little distance. This is where the executioner lives. Not outside society exactly, not safely inside it either. You approach through grass wet with evening dew, hearing frogs in the ditch and cartwheels fading behind you. The air smells of mud, ash, leather, and boiled water. A dog watches from beneath a cart, uncertain whether to bark or avoid professional involvement, somewhere nearby. A crow settles on a fence post with the quiet confidence of a creature that understands human institutions better than most humans do. The executioner is necessary, feared, despised, and sometimes strangely privileged. He carries out sentences others pronounce, judges speak, clerks write, priests pray, crowds watch. Yet his hands perform the act that makes the judgment real. Without him, the law remains words and posture. With him, the law becomes wound, rope, blade, fire, or burial. That makes him powerful. It also makes him polluted. Medieval and early modern records from European towns show that executioners often occupied a marginal social position, sometimes living near edges of settlements and performing additional disliked work. Historians at universities such as Oxford, Princeton, and Chicago have examined civic accounts, guild exclusions, and legal records that reveal this uneasy status. The office could bring fees and protections, but also social stigma. People needed the executioner, then punished him with disgust for doing what they required. It is a very human arrangement. Very convenient too. You imagine him at his table, not as a snarling villain, but as a tired professional sharpening a blade by lamplight. He may have a family, he may keep accounts, he may worry about payment, he may train an apprentice or son, because such work sometimes passes through families when no one else wants the inheritance. His children may be avoided by others, his wife may be treated with suspicion. The stain of the office can spread through the household. This social exclusion has a logic rooted in ideas of honour, blood, death, and ritual impurity. To touch condemned bodies, handle corpses, break bones, or manage instruments of pain places the executioner near boundaries that others fear. He stands between law and death, between public order and the physical mess that order creates. Society wants him to cross that line so others can remain clean. Yet he does not only kill. In some towns, executioners perform tasks considered dishonourable but necessary, such as removing animal carcasses, cleaning filth, managing stray dogs, or assisting with punishment short of death. The same marginality that isolates him also makes him useful for work no respectable craft wants to claim. He becomes a keeper of unpleasant necessities, a kind of civic shadow. A mainstream historical fact appears in municipal payment records from late medieval and early modern German cities. Executioners could receive set fees for specific punishments, from whipping to beheading to disposal of remains. Scholars of European legal history have used these records to show how punishment became part of urban administration. Violence was not only ritual, it was budgeted, itemized, and paid. There is something chilling about a fee schedule for suffering. A coin for this blow, more for that death, payment for rope, cart, ladder, sword, burial, or cleaning. The account book does not scream, it balances. That quietness may be more unsettling than noise, because it shows how cruelty settles into procedure. Once listed in accounts, even horror can look like a municipal expense. You step closer to a shed where a ladder leans against the wall. Nearby lies a coil of rope, protected from damp. A sword rests in a wrapped cloth, because for certain, execution skill matters intensely. A botched hanging, a clumsy beheading, a broken wheel mishandled before the crowd can transform authority into shame. The executioner must be competent, because public punishment depends on controlled terror, not chaos. This skill gives him a strange professional pride, A clean stroke may be valued. A quick death may be considered merciful. Officials may seek an experienced executioner for difficult sentences. In some places, his craft is so specialized that towns borrow executioners from one another. The man avoided at church may still be summoned with urgency when the law needs its most serious gestures performed correctly. A quirky tidbit from executioner lore concerns their reputation as healers. In parts of Europe, executioners were sometimes believed to possess knowledge of bones, joints, wounds, and powerful remedies because they handled bodies so often. Some people quietly sought their medical help, even while publicly shunning them. Apparently, society could find a man too filthy to dine with, but clean enough to set a dislocated shoulder. Human consistency remains undefeated in its absence. The executioner also controls small mercies. He may allow a condemned person time to pray. He may position the rope carefully. He may accept payment from relatives to speed death or preserve dignity. He may speak calmly to someone shaking at the scaffold, or he may be brutal, careless, drunk, resentful, or theatrical. The office creates room for both humanity and cruelty within the same hand. Scholars continue to debate how executioners understood their own moral place. Some historians emphasize their marginalization, suggesting they were treated as necessary outcasts trapped by inherited dishonor. Others point to evidence of wealth, specialized knowledge, and civic privilege, arguing that some executioners carved out a rough status from their feared expertise. The records differ by region and period. A lonely cottage in one town might be a profitable office in another. You hear footsteps on the road. People pass but do not look too openly toward the house. Avoidance itself becomes a form of recognition. Everyone knows who lives here. Everyone knows when he is needed. Yet polite society pretends distance can protect it from complicity. The judge did not tie the knot. The merchant did not swing the blade. The crowd only watched. The executioner carries the visible blame. This burden is useful. It allows the community to separate law from blood. Officials can frame punishment as justice, while the executioner becomes the one associated with gore, touch, and finality. He absorbs the physical disgrace of lawful violence. In that sense, he's not merely an employee. He's a container for collective discomfort. Perhaps this is why the executioner so often appears in stories as both monstrous and oddly intimate. He knows the final faces of the condemned. He hears last words that clerks may not record. He feels the body's weight. He understands whether fear makes someone silent, pleading, angry, dignified, or strangely calm. The law may speak in general terms, but he encounters the particular person. A condemned man is not simply a thief when the rope is being adjusted. He is a neck, a breath, a pulse, a trembling jaw, a request for water, a prayer remembered badly. The executioner must reduce that person to technique or be destroyed by the work. Professional distance becomes emotional armor. It may harden into cruelty, but it may begin a survival. The town needs that hardness. Public punishment must not collapse into hesitation. If the executioner weeps, misses, delays, or refuses, the crowd sees authority falter. A good executioner protects the performance from human weakness. He makes the unbearable appear orderly. That is one of the deepest cruelties of the role. He turns death into administration. Night gathers near the ditch. A lantern appears behind the shutter, small and amber. For a moment, the house looks almost ordinary. Someone inside may be eating supper, mending a strap, telling a child to sleep. The man feared by the town may himself fear illness, debt, loneliness, or the next summons. The instrument of terror is still human, which offers no comfort at all. You step back from the dwelling, hearing the frogs continue their soft, indifferent music. The executioner remains at the margin because the town cannot fully accept what his existence proves. Punishment is not only decreed by distant authority. It requires hands. It requires skill. It requires someone to stand close enough to make the sentence real. The road darkens. The tools wait, and at the edge of respectability, where law meets flesh, a necessary outcast keeps the town's cruelest secrets clean enough for others to call them justice. The town does not change all at once. It never does. Cruel customs rarely vanish like mist under morning sun. They linger in courtrooms, in habits, in the speech of officials, in the memories of those who think fear has served them well. Yet something begins to shift, quietly, almost reluctantly, like ice loosening beneath a river that still looks frozen. You feel that change in a chamber where clerks now keep more careful records. The air smells of ink, wax, old parchment, and rain drying from wool cloaks. A judge sits beneath a carved beam, listening while written evidence moves from hand to hand. The room remains stern. The law remains capable of violence. But a new impatience gathers around older cruelties. Some punishments begin to seem excessive, unpredictable, or embarrassing to officials who prefer order with cleaner edges. Reform begins with discomfort, not mercy alone. Medieval justice is not replaced overnight by modern compassion, and no thoughtful person should pretend otherwise. The road is long, uneven, and full of reversals. Still, across late medieval towns and kingdoms, one can see growing attention to procedure, record-keeping, rights of jurisdiction, appeals, pardons, and regulation of punishment. Authority does not always become gentler because hearts soften. Sometimes it becomes gentler because systems become more controlled. Records from late medieval and early modern courts show gradual efforts to regularize legal processes, limit private vengeance, and place more power in centralized institutions. Scholars at Oxford, Harvard, and Yale have studied these changes through royal records, civic ordinances, and legal commentaries. Their work suggests that cruelty began to change partly because governments wanted predictable authority. A punishment that looks too chaotic can weaken the very power it claims to defend. You see this in the town hall, where officials argue over jurisdiction. Which court has the right to hear a case? Which lord may punish? Which church officer may intervene? Which royal command overrides local custom? Such questions sound dry, and yes, they are dry enough to make dust seem lively. Yet they matter. When power is forced to define itself, violence can become harder to improvise. Written procedure slows the hand, not always, not enough, but sometimes. A clerk must record accusation, testimony, value, sentence, pardon, or appeal. A judge must justify an action within recognized forms. A sheriff must answer for custody. A local officer may face scrutiny if a prisoner dies carelessly or if punishment exceeds custom. The body is still vulnerable, but the paper trail grows longer. That paper trail can protect. It can also trap. The same records that restrain arbitrary violence can deepen state power. A name written once can return. A reputation entered into court can follow a person through later accusations. Centralized authority may reduce local feuds, yet it can also punish more efficiently. Reform is rarely innocent. It trims wild branches, then builds a stronger fence. A mainstream historical fact emerges from the development of English common law and continental learned law. By the later Middle Ages, courts increasingly depended on written documentation, professional legal knowledge, and formal procedures. Research associated with universities such as Cambridge and Stanford has traced how legal institutions became more specialized over time. This did not abolish brutality, but it changed the way brutality was authorized, recorded, and questioned. You step through another doorway into a council room where merchants, aldermen, and local officers debate a town ordinance. Their concerns are practical. Disorder hurts trade. Excessive punishment may provoke unrest. Too little punishment invites theft. Public shame may suffice for some offences, while hanging may seem necessary for others. They are not philosophers in velvet clouds. They are administrators with accounts to balance and streets to keep calm. Urban life encourages this balancing. Towns depend on trade, reputation, skilled labour, and the smooth movement of goods. A merchant city cannot hang or maim every troublesome person without damaging its own economy. Fines, banishment, bonds for good behaviour, public apology, and negotiated settlement often serve better. Cruelty begins to compete with usefulness, and usefulness sometimes wins. A curious tidbit appears in the growth of surety systems. People could be bound by pledges, promising good behaviour under penalty of payment. This meant your neighbours might become financially responsible for your conduct, which is a splendid way to make everyone at dinner stare at you with deep personal concern. Instead of cutting the body, the law could bind reputation, money, and social pressure together. Such arrangements show a changing preference for managing risk before violence becomes necessary. The law begins to ask, who can guarantee this person? Who will stand surety? Who will pay if trouble returns? Punishment does not disappear. It becomes one instrument among others. The community remains watchful, but the watchfulness is increasingly folded into paperwork and obligation. The church also plays a changing role. Confession, penance, reconciliation, and moral correction remain important. Yet church courts are themselves part of a more documented legal culture. Bishops, archdeacons, and ecclesiastical officials keep records, impose penances, hear defamation cases, and regulate marriage disputes. Their punishments can shame deeply, but they often aim at correction rather than physical destruction. The soul is supervised through ritual and record. Still, doubts begin to gather around certain forms of cruelty. Not always openly, not always from compassion alone. Some officials worry that torture produces false confession. Some theologians worry about excess. Some rulers worry that spectacular brutality may create martyrs. Some towns worry about disorderly crowds. Some legal thinkers want proportionality, because uncontrolled severity makes law look less like justice and more like rage in official clothing. Scholars continue to debate when and why European punishment became less physically brutal in many places. Some emphasize the rise of centralized states and disciplined institutions. Others point to religious reform, humanist thought, economic change, urban administration, or shifting ideas about the body. There is no single key. History, unhelpfully but truthfully, hands you a ring with many keys and refuses to label the doors. You enter a prison room that is newer than the old dungeon, though hardly comfortable. The straw is fresher, a window admits more light, a lock has been repaired. These details do not create mercy, but they suggest oversight. Someone has inspected, someone has paid. Someone has decided that confinement itself can serve the law more regularly. The prison begins to move from temporary holding place toward punishment in its own right. That shift has deep consequences. When authorities rely more on imprisonment, they may rely less on mutilation or public pain. Yet prison brings its own cruelties, quieter and longer. Reform can move suffering from the square into the cell. The crowd sees less, so the conscience sleeps more easily. A hidden punishment may be less bloody, but not automatically humane. This is why the story of change must be told carefully. Medieval cruelty does not simply fade into modern kindness, it transforms. The body may be spared the brand, but lose years behind walls. The scaffold may grow less central, while surveillance, paperwork, forced labour, and confinement expand. Every age invents the punishments that suit its fears. In the council chamber, candlelight reflects on wax seals. Officials speak of order, cost, mercy, deterrence, and reputation. They use different words, but their problem is familiar. How much pain does society believe it needs? How much suffering will it tolerate in the name of safety? How visible should punishment be? How much uncertainty can law endure before it reaches for cruelty? These questions do not belong only to the past. They have long shadows. Outside, the town continues breathing. A baker lifts loaves from the oven. A child chases a hoop through the lane. A clerk closes a book and rubs ink from his fingers. The gallows still stands somewhere beyond the gate, but its meaning is slowly being questioned by the very systems that once depended on it. Not rejected completely, not yet, but questioned. And questions are dangerous things to old cruelties. They do not break chains immediately. They teach people to hear them. Night settles over the town at last, softening roofs, gates, walls, and the dark arms of the scaffold beyond the road. The market has emptied, the church door is closed, the last carts have left long tracks in the mud, now filling slowly with black rainwater. You stand where many paths meet, and the silence feels less like peace than exhaustion. The cruelty remains because the fear remains. That is the deeper truth. Medieval punishment is not cruel for one reason only. It is not simply because people were ignorant, or savage, or entertained by suffering, although cruelty and entertainment sometimes walk together with unfortunate confidence. It is cruel because the world around it is fragile. Food is uncertain, authority is contested, disease arrives without warning, roads are dangerous, records are limited, prison is expensive, reputation is public, salvation feels urgent, order must be seen to exist. A society under pressure often reaches for visible answers. The gallows answers disorder with height. The pillory answers deceit with shame. The brand answers theft with memory. The prison answers uncertainty with containment. The fire answers religious fear with purification. Each punishment says, something has gone wrong, and here is the body on which the world will pretend to set it right. That pretense is powerful. It is also tragic. Research from major universities, including Oxford, Cambridge, Yale, and Harvard, has shown that medieval justice was deeply embedded in social structure, local custom, religious belief, and royal administration, court rolls, town records, church documents, and archaeological evidence reveal not a single system, but many overlapping systems. Punishment changed by place, rank, crime, gender, wealth, and century. Yet across those differences, a one pattern returns. Pain was often made public because authority needed memory to do the work that institutions could not yet do. You walk past the quiet pillory. In daylight, it may look almost ridiculous. A wooden device waiting for a head that is not there. At night, it becomes stranger. Its emptiness lets you imagine every face once fixed inside it. The liar, the baker, the scold, the thief, the drunk, the unlucky, the guilty, the innocent, the person who deserved correction, and the person crushed by a story larger than the truth. Medieval punishment depends on categories, but life is more tangled than categories allow. A thief may be hungry, a heretic may be sincere, a rebel may be desperate, a murderer may be feared by everyone for good reason, a judge may be careful, a crowd may be cruel, a priest may be merciful, an executioner may be kinder in the final moment than the officials who sentenced the condemned. History refuses clean comfort. It always has. A mainstream historical fact helps anchor this complexity. Surviving medieval legal records show that many punishments were financial or corrective rather than fatal, including fines, sureties, public penance, and local settlement. Scholars at leading research institutions emphasize that the most spectacular punishments were not the whole of medieval justice. Yet spectacular punishments mattered because they shaped imagination. The rare, terrible sentence could discipline many people who never experienced it. Fear does not need constant use, it needs credibility. Once a community believes the scaffold may be used, the scaffold works even in silence. Once a brand is known, unmarked skin feels conditional. Once the prison door is heard, the street outside seems less free. Cruelty survives not only through repeated violence, but through anticipation. People discipline themselves because they can imagine what happens if they do not. This is why punishment becomes a language. It speaks to the poor, telling them not to cross property lines. It speaks to women, telling them to guard reputation and speech. It speaks to nobles, telling them loyalty is watched. It speaks to merchants, telling them measures must be honest. It speaks to believers, telling them doctrine is not merely personal thought. It speaks to strangers, telling them entry into the town means submission to its order. A quirky fringe detail lingers in old beliefs around gallows places. People sometimes treated the ground near execution sites as unlucky, enchanted, or useful for strange charms. Soil, rope, wood, or bodily remains could attract fearful fascination. Official punishment tried to create moral clarity, yet folklore turned it into mystery. The lesson meant to be plain became haunted, which seems very typical of human beings. We are given a warning sign, and somehow we invent a ghost story around it. And that haunting tells you something important. Cruel punishment never belongs entirely to the rulers who design it. Once released into the public world, it gathers meanings. Some see justice, some see tyranny, some see divine order, some see revenge, some see a warning meant for them. Some see a neighbour they once knew smiling across a table. The body on display becomes a mirror, and not everyone likes what appears there. Scholars continue to debate whether medieval cruelty should be understood mainly as deterrence, ritual, religious correction, class control, or communal self-defense. Some emphasize practical limitations, such as weak policing and costly imprisonment. Others stress symbolic power, noting that authority used suffering to make hierarchy feel natural. Still others explore how ordinary people participated in and sometimes resisted punishments. The debate remains open because cruelty has many roots, and each root drinks from a different fear. You stand near the town gate, listening to wind move through the empty arch. The gate once controlled bodies entering and leaving. Now it seems to control memory. On one side lies the road, dark and uncertain. On the other lies the town, warm in scattered windows, full of sleeping people who want safety more than justice in the abstract. They want their children unharmed, their bread honest, their tools unstolen, their souls saved, their rulers strong enough to prevent chaos. That desire is understandable. It is also dangerous. When people are afraid enough, they may accept suffering as the price of order, especially when someone else pays that price with his body. They may call cruelty discipline, they may call shame correction, they may call terror peace, they may believe all of it sincerely, because sincerity has never prevented harm. The medieval world teaches that fear can make harshness feel responsible. Yet it also teaches that cruelty is never only practical. It needs stories to survive. Stories about sin, obedience, purity, blood, property, gender, honour, and divine judgment. Stories about who belongs and who threatens belonging. Stories about why one body may be broken so the community can sleep. Once those stories weaken, punishment changes. Not always enough, and not always kindly. But it changes. The rain begins lightly, touching the road with small silver marks. It falls on the scaffold, the church roof, the manor ditch, the prison stones, and the cottage shutters. It falls without caring who was guilty. It washes blood, mud, ashes, and footprints into the same earth. Nature has no legal categories, which is inconvenient for courts and comforting for tired minds. You take one last look at the town. Its cruelty was not simple. Its people were not monsters from a darker species. They were human beings living under hunger, belief, hierarchy, danger, and hope. That may be the most unsettling answer to the question. Medieval punishments were cruel because medieval society thought cruelty could hold back collapse. Perhaps it sometimes did. Perhaps it mostly taught fear to speak with authority's voice. And perhaps, beneath every old scaffold, the same question still waits in the dark. asking how much suffering a frightened world will mistake for safety. Now the road grows quieter, and the town begins to fade behind you. The high roofs soften into shadow. The stones lose their edges. Even the old places of punishment seem less certain, less heavy, as night gathers them into one dim shape beneath the rain. You can let the images loosen now. The square, the court, the prison, the road, the cathedral, the manor hall, and the house at the edge of town all drift apart like smoke from low candles. Nothing needs to be solved. Nothing needs to be held tightly. The past has shown its hard face, and you have looked at it gently. There is still a bell somewhere, but it sounds farther away than before. It does not summon a crowd now. It only marks the hour, calm and slow, crossing the sleeping roofs with a tired tenderness. The people of that world return to their beds, to straw mattresses, wool blankets, banked fires, and dreams shaped by work, prayer, hunger, and rain. You breathe in the darkness and let the story become softer. The cruelty remains in memory, but it no longer presses close. It becomes history again, distant and quiet, resting behind glass, parchment, stone, and soil. The punished are not only warnings now, they are human traces, asking to be remembered without noise, and perhaps that is enough for tonight. To remember without shouting, to wonder without fear, to see how fragile people built harsh answers around fragile lives, then slowly disappeared into the earth they tried so desperately to govern. The rain continues, the road is empty, the old town sleeps, and perhaps, somewhere beyond its walls, morning is already forming, pale and patient, over fields where no scaffold casts a shadow. End of script. Good night.